Hello and welcome to a comparison video of the app HiPaint. Now, if you're new here to this channel, my objective here is to create digital art tutorials, whether or not you're on Android or iOS. There's loads of apps that are available on multiple platforms, and HiPaint is one of them. Otherwise, you've got apps like Infinite Painter as well, which I've created multiple tutorials on my channel. But today's video is just going to be a quick overview of the app HiPaint, because I think it's worth your time and consideration as one of your digital art apps, again, whether or not you're on Android or iOS. Now, when you first download the app, you're presented with this screen here, and this is your gallery. Here, you'll be able to find all of the canvases that you've created in HiPaint, and maybe ones that you import as well will also sit here as well. Now, you can see you can have multiple canvases as well, and you can also put them into folders. There's just a few in there that I've chucked together, but you can actually put them into folders where you can then just keep your work nice and organized. So you actually have a couple of tabs. You can see your favorites as well if you need to. And in the top right corner, there's a couple of different options for search, as well as changing the order of this and based on when they were created, etc. Now at the bottom, you are in this tab here, but you have the plus icon to create a canvas. And just very quickly on the right hand side, you have the option here for your settings where you can change the theme. I've changed it to light mode just for this video, but otherwise you can have dark mode as well and just follow your app. But there's loads of different options in here. Now this app's actually free, except they do apparently show you ads, though I've not seen any at all. So if you want to, you can actually purchase under advanced features the option of removing ads. Weirdly, I've not seen any, so I'm not too sure why that's there. If we go back to our gallery though, we've then got the option here to create a new canvas. If you hit this plus, you can create a new painting or a new folder, or even import or open a previous one. Now we're going to go ahead and create a new painting. And then when you do that, you can then see lots of different sort of varying, very common sizes. So you can see the aspect ratios, you can see the actual pixel count of the different painting canvases, and you can also see how many layers that will be provided to you based on your device. Now I typically go to the option of custom, and I always have a 2000 by 2000 canvas and hit the option of OK, and that actually gives me 82 layers. And you can also go ahead and set the PPI. 300 is what's typically recommended should you ever want to print this. And you can hit OK, you go through to your canvas. So you can pinch and zoom just like in Procreate and Infinite Painter, and you can also see the angle. You can also pinch with two fingers very quickly and it will snap it to the full screen. Now when you first download the app, you can actually change this at a later date, but if you go ahead and go to your sketch settings, it'll actually ask you, do you want to position the brush tools on the left, the right, or wherever else in distributed. I always put it on the left because it matches up to a lot of the other apps that I use, such as Infinite Painter and Procreate. You can change the brush size here, you can change the opacity, which is very common. So you can go ahead and start drawing, and you can lower the opacity to something a little bit lighter. And we'll go through all of the tools. So let's just take a look around the interface. You've got the back button to take you back to the gallery. You can save your work. The plus icon actually houses a few different options. You can import a picture into your canvas. You can tap on picture. You can tap on a picture and then it will drop it in, and you can scale it up and down, and it puts it as a layer in your work. So you could just put that up in the top left hand corner there, for example. If we go back to the plus, you can also go ahead and insert a reference, which is really useful because then you don't add it to your canvas and as a layer. So you can hit reference. You then get this little window pop up. You can either choose your actual canvas using this icon here, or you can grab one from your photos. Now that might be really useful in a tutorial such as this one here, where I've actually provided the palette image here and you can move along it. It's a bit awkward to do in the very small window, but you can make it much larger or smaller and just sort of position that maybe like so. And then you can grab the colors from it accordingly. It's totally up to you. Now we can get rid of that as well. If we go up to the plus, another good feature is the shapes. So you can tap on shapes, you get the options here that they have available. And if you tap this icon here in the bottom right, that makes it a solid icon. So for example, if I try to drag out a circle now, I'm free to pick sort of the dimensions as I wish. If I then tap on this icon here, you can see now that that's now changed to a perfect circle. So you can always make sure you get those nice perfect shapes. And of course, you can then change your tool to a line. You can change it to a square and so on. Now, if we just hit the tick there, we can go back to the plus. What else do we have? We have the option of symmetry here. Now, symmetry is very, very popular in a lot of apps. You can set a horizontal symmetry option where what I draw on one side is reflected on the other. And I can actually combine that with the shapes tool. So I can hit the tick here. If I go back, and I get rid of the shape option here. So we go ahead and we tap away. We go back to the option of symmetry. whatever I draw on one side is reflected on the other. You can do vertical as well, so again what you draw on one side is reflected. You can then have multiple varying options such as rotational symmetry, which are really popular in a lot of apps. And you can move the actual sort of grid system around if you wish. You can also go ahead and lock it in play. And then what you create in one of these is then mirrored all the way around. How cool is that? If you're new to this kind of thing, it's really mesmerizing to actually watch people create these types of designs. If we undo those though, you can have multiple variations. You can introduce even more sort of pizza slices here of the rotational symmetry. So you can really sort of create some fantastic looking sort of symmetrical art pieces. And there's also, again, further options where when you cross over, it actually stops. So you have to draw within the slice that you start in, and when you hit the line, you stop. So that's really fun. Just take note of should you want to go ahead and create some symmetrical designs. Another tool on the plus icon here is then the option of creating a grid system, which is really useful. I use this a lot in all of my tutorials. You can create multiple types of grid, and you also have the magnetic option. So without the magnet on, if I draw, I can draw wherever I want. But if I tap on this magnet, I can now only draw based on the grid. And because the grid is horizontal and vertical lined, I can only draw horizontally or vertically. So you can create this kind of line effect like so. And if you change it to a different type of assist here, you can then go ahead and draw along those lines, so horizontal or potentially on those sort of slightly angled lines. And you've got the cubic option here, where these ones here are your perspectives. So you can then have a 1-point perspective, so you can put the perspective, say, down here in the bottom right, and everything point in towards that point like so. You can then have multiple points, so you can drag them around. You can see where you want to create your 2 different points of perspective. And if I change the line to say something a little bit thicker for you, you can see these 2 points clashing, and they are the lines of your perspective. So you'd have your horizon here, and you could create some buildings or something like that. Really useful tools. If we go to the plus icon, there's also the option of adding in text, which is really impressive compared to some of the other apps that are available on cross-platform. A lot of them don't have this feature. You can tap on the little button here at the bottom to change its appearance, its scale. You can drag the box out, you can make it bigger, larger. You can also change the font to a few that are built in. And you can also go ahead and change its alignment. And you also have the outline option, which is really handy as well. If we go to the plus icon, we also have gradient, which I love. You can create 3 different types of gradient. You've got linear, radial, and you've got rotating gradient. But I always end up using linear. You can also add multiple points on here, so you can introduce some additional colors. So maybe a yellow, so white through to yellow into red, which is really impressive. And you can move them around. You can scale them up and down the gradient as well. That's actually one feature I really like that I wish Procreate would potentially introduce as well. Again, plus icon, we've got light pad and tilt tiling tool. Now, tiling tool is actually really impressive. If we go ahead and draw in a simple little smiley face here for our little friend here. If we go up to the plus icon and go to tiling, it takes what you've drawn and then can create you a nice grid and a repeating pattern. So you don't have to do it yourself manually. You can scale this down and look at how it just starts to bring in all these different options. You can also sort of misalign it slightly as well, so you don't just have the same repeating pattern sort of directly on top of each other. Look how cool that is. You can scale that up and down in size as well. And then obviously more vertical options here. You do also have the option to sort of space them out a tiny bit more should you wish, and create whatever pattern you like. And how cool is that? Now, when you draw in here, it doesn't then repeat that for the rest of the pattern. So once you stop the tiling tool, it then comes to an end. Now, if we go ahead and we keep our little face for a minute, the last one is tiling tool. So we'll move on. We've got the fill tool, multiple variations on the tolerance and extending the sort of variation of it. The 4th option up here is liquefy. If we tap on that, you can then go ahead and see a few different options for this. And liquefy is usually buried in a menu, but they put it right at the top. So I've got the option of push. And I can use the brush here. If I just bring the pressure up a tiny bit more, tap away. So if we get rid of that, I can then push away and push and adjust and liquefy my design how I wish. And there's other options. You've got twirl right, for example, where you can start to spin your design around should that be something that you want to do. You've also then got the option to pinch, which is going to bring your design in a little bit. So I can pinch like so, or I can go ahead and make it expand as well. Now you can adjust the settings as you've just seen me do. You can change the brush size and the pressure, meaning if you then tap away, it might not be too drastic too quickly. So just slow it down for you a little bit. We then get into the fifth option up here, which is transform typically. So you can go ahead and use normal, which is uniform locked, meaning it just keeps the scale of your design the same. You can rotate it using this one here at the top. You can use the option of distort. You can drag out a node here and there. You can really flip it around and create some craziness with your design, but really get some nice perspective if that's something that you're looking to do, as well as really handy options for flip horizontal and flip vertical, which you can do whilst you're editing, which is fantastic. And then when you're done, you can just tap on the tool at the top. You've then got the option of selection. So you can create a selection, you can create a lasso. So we can draw around an eye here, for example. And then if I want to, I can combine that with transform and I can move that eye around exactly how I want it, which is really cool. And then you've also got magic wand, which I don't typically use, but if you need to for your type of work. And you've also got some options here of add, subtract, invert, and clear. So you can get into all of these once you start to sort of mess around with it. Now, we move into some of the more popular tools. We've got the option of smudge. If you tap on smudge, you then get the brush menu. So if you were going to go ahead and go to something, say, like painting and the sawtooth, you can max out the brush size and you can just smudge as you wish, just like you would with real paint. And you can just move that around, smudge it to your heart's content, like so, and change the brush accordingly. Now, one thing they've actually done is put the blur as well at the top here. So you can go to the blur tool. That also works again with the brush menu. So once you get a brush that you like, you can then go ahead and start to blur it like this. And that might actually be very, very useful if you've got a design with some really good distance in there. You may want to blur out the furthest options. We then move to the actual brushes themselves. So we've got the brush menu here. Now the brushes are not quite as sort of packed out as I hoped they would be. We've got a few different options down the right. Now imported is quite interesting and important because you can actually download external brushes and import them into here. So all you have to do with all of these is save them to your files and import them in. So you just share it to your files, share it to HiPaint, and they'll pop in here. You can also go ahead and create categories. You can then go through the categories, and some of them are more graphically sort of, different to just a regular brush. You will have these pearls here potentially. You've then also got hearts, you've got logos, you've got stars and kittens and so on. But if you get down to sort of the basics, we've got some interesting sort of soft air brushes. The soft airbrush works quite different compared to other apps that I've used, but a lot of them, of course, are pressure sensitive. So if you've got a device that has pressure sensitivity, you can press really light and get some thin lines, and nice and large, of course, the harder you press. So we've got basic, we've got some airbrushes, which are really handy for skin, and I use them quite a lot in all of my designs. Sketching, 6B pencils there, so I'm happy, but we've got just a selection of around about sort of 6 or 7 there. We've got dry media, so this is going to be more your charcoals, some fantastic textures in here, and again, you can scale them up and down, and you can sketch. The lighter you press, you get a nice soft amount, and tilt sensitivity, I believe, is also present to a degree, so we can go ahead and just charcoal in there. If we go back, we've got ink, bleed, we've got what is essentially a monoline brush in the ballpoint pen, and just a few options in there. Chalk is present as well. Chalk is a fan favorite of mine. Just a little bit of a rough edge to it, which is nice. And if we go airbrushing, we've got a few different options in here, such as the fat nozzle, medium nozzle, fine, and so on. And you've got the flicks as well, so you can get those nice sort of paint splats. If we go back to the brushes, we've got painting, only a few in here, not as many as I'd hoped. Not that many that you could really create some interesting work with. I usually work with a lot more than these ones, but I'm sure we could maybe find some additional ones. We've got plants, so there's quite a few sort of built-in ones, one of which is these weeds, which might actually be very, very useful for a lot of people. It's got too much of a scatter on it for me, but we can always adjust that though in the brush settings, which I'll show you in a moment. If we go to materials, we've got short hair, we've got skin, stubble, beard, etc. Lights, there is a couple of different options. Bokeh is always a fan favorite of mine, as well as a starry sky as well, so you can create some nice stars in your design. We then also have some additional options of lighting. Elements, we've got clouds, we've got smog, we've got ripples, so we can create some lovely water effects should you have a design with some water in, of course. And then we've got grids as well, so it's just some interesting patterns where you could maybe color in a particular part with a repeating pattern. And it looks like if we zoom in, the pattern doesn't sort of misalign, it completely overlaps the previous one. So you can just carry on a grid later on should you have started to paint one in. Now, the brushes also move into the eraser as well, so then you can start to erase using the grid brush here and so on. So all of the same brushes are available in eraser, the brush, blur and smudge. You then get to your layers. Really important for digital art to maximize the amount of layers that you can use, just so you've got more freedom. If you then hit the plus icon, you can create more layers. You can also create groups. You can then also go ahead and select multiple layers. So when you select multiple layers, for example, if I draw something in a contrasting color, so I put some blue over here with the with the grid, should I say. If I go to my layers, you can see I've got a blue layer and a red layer. If I go ahead and I swipe from left to right, I can select multiple layers, which means I can also go ahead and grab the transform tool, for example, and move them around at the same time. Really handy little tip that, if you've not already seen that before. And in here, you can then go ahead, as I mentioned, group. So once you've selected some layers, like I've done here, I've got 2 selected, you can go ahead and hit the folder and it will group them together for you. You can collapse folders down, you can hide them if needs be. And each layer, you can also go ahead and tap on it. You can swipe it to the left and duplicate it. You can reference it or you can delete it. So if you hit duplicate, you'll get an extra version. Now you can also then tap on the layer and you get some additional options. We've got copy, we've got merge, merge all. These are all standard sort of tools that you may or may not have seen before. Merge merges it down to the one that's below it into one layer. Merge all will merge all of your layers into one layer. We've then got lock layer, so that means you can't adjust it. You've then got lock transparent pixels, which means you can only then paint on what was already painted on that layer. So if I go down to my red layer here that's got a little bit crazy and I lock it, if I grab a brush, I can only paint within the boundaries of the red here. You can see that there, so I perfectly stay within the lines. If we then go ahead and go back to the layer, we can tap on it. We've got the option to delete. You can export a layer as a PNG, really interesting tool there. You can also then layer color change, not too sure what that does myself, but reference the layer as well. Really important tools here. You've got the option to change the opacity of a layer and also change its blend mode. And there's loads of blend modes in here that match up to apps such as Infinite Painter and most importantly, somewhat Procreate as well. So they all match up accordingly, which is really cool. Now, one thing I've just noticed is missing is actually masking. Now that may be available in another option. We'll see as we go. Now in the color panel here, you then have the option of the disc where you can drag to different points here and rotate around to select different colors. You then see a few of your latest used colors. I believe it's 14. And you can also see the hex code of the color you're using. Now, annoyingly, you don't actually get the option to see your palette that you're currently using in here. There isn't an option to do that. But we can go to the square tab here, which just allows you to get a different variation on your color picker. And then the third tab down here is some of your palettes. Now, you may have seen earlier that I imported this image here into the app. Now, I actually created a palette for this, so you can see that down here. So this is actually going to be a tutorial that's going to follow this particular video as well. So if you want to follow along with your very first HiPaint tutorial, it's perfect for beginners. You can download this exact same palette, because in the top right of any palette you can see 2 dots. If you tap on it, you can duplicate the palette, you can delete it, or you can share it. And you can go ahead and you can go to any color. So whatever your color is currently that you've got active, you can go to a palette and you can just simply tap to add that color into any of the tiles you want. Now, I'm not too sure is what happens necessarily if you fill them up. Yeah, so you do get the option by the looks of it. At my early stages, it looks like you can go up to around about 14 total. And you can go ahead and hit the plus in the top right. That creates a new palette right at the bottom. It'd be nice if that scrolled down to the palette, but you see it there at the bottom anyway. And there we go. That is our colors. If we go up to the 3 dots, so this is where we've got some more interesting options. You can adjust the canvas size. So you can zoom out using 2 fingers, of course. You can crop a design if you want to. You can adjust it and it gives you a live pixel count at the bottom. We'll cancel that though. If we go to the 3 dots again, you can clear your design. You can flip it horizontal. You can flip it vertically as well if you wish. Correction again is really cool. If I hit correction, it just adjusts your lines as you draw. Now, if you watch in this dark area, there'll be a red line just following my pen there. That is the software trying to make my lines way more smooth. Look how sort of different that is. But if I change the correction up to something quite high, it follows around and it just smooths out. It takes a little bit of time behind your line, but it smooths it all out for you. Really handy for people that really struggle with that. I always keep mine around about sort of 35 to 40%. If we go back up, you've got the option of time-lapse replay, so you can go ahead and see all of the stuff we've just done in today's video, so just all the different stages of it. And you can actually share that as well. You can go up to the share icon here in the top right. You can export it as a duration that it sets, such as 6 seconds. But the longer your actual design is, that may increase as well. And you can export it to your gallery. You can also share it as well to a particular app. Really cool if you want to share it on social media. If we go to 3 dots again, we've got the option to create an animation. So what that does is you get the options just like Procreate, where you can go ahead and sort of make your way through all your different slides, and you can change how it works. You can make it sort of loop where it goes round and round and round. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Or you can have it ping pong where it goes 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, and so on. So it goes backwards and forwards. Or you can have it go through your slides one time and that's it. And you can change the frames per second of how quick that is, and also your onion skinning. All of that can be explained in further tutorials as well, but it does have animation, which is really, really cool. If we go back to our settings, we go to sketch settings, and in here you can see I've just changed a few different things. We've got the curve tool in action. You can also see I've got pen mode on, so I can't draw with my finger. I can only draw with the pen. You can also go ahead and add in, I believe, some palm rejection in here as well, just in case that is something that you require for your particular tablet or phone. And you can also go ahead and add in some gestures as well in here, such as you can change the 2-finger and 3-finger if you wish, or you can go ahead and change your pen long press and your finger long press. I've got it set to the color picker because that's what I commonly use the most. And then we've also got some work information, as well as you can also connect this to a drawing tablet if you're on that particular platform. Now this tab's actually really interesting though. In here you can go ahead and set some adjustments. So let's get rid of the animation for a minute. If we make sure we're on this layer here and we go to this option again, so you've got color balance, you can go ahead and just boost your mid-tones if you want, to boost the reds, maybe introduce a bit more green in here, maybe even a bit more blue or even yellow. You can adjust your highlights and increase those. So lots of things to play with. Likewise, your shadows as well. You can make your design really blue if you want really dark. We'll go back up. You've got the option of brightness and contrast, really useful if you just need to make a slight adjustment to your design, just to boost it wherever necessary. And we've got natural saturation. Not quite sure what this one is. Let's take a look. I think it gets rid of a lot of the yellows there, increases the reds for some reason. And we've got saturation as well. So we'll cross that out. We've then got really important tools to me. We'll skip opacity because opacity is pretty straightforward. We've got Gaussian blur, so that's where you can just introduce some nice soft blur into your design. Yes, you've got the blur tool, but you can just use this one if you wish. And then we also have the option of motion blur, so you can drag in the direction that you need to create some motion blur. Really important if you've got something such as you want to show some speed somehow, you know, just a tiny bit of motion blur, just like a tiny bit like that. Also makes things a bit more disorientating. And if we go up to the 3 dots, you've also got liquefy here, which is also up there. And you've also got sharpen as well as noise as well. Noise is really cool because you can just make things look a little bit more realistic sometimes with some noise in here, because a lot of real life does have those nice variations to it where you just see little sort of random pixels in here, such as down here where we've got some nice little bits of noise happening. And the 3 dots, that should have summarized everything. The option there then is to share. You can export your work as a JPEG or a PNG or even a GIF, and you can also share it as a file with the options of PSD as well as HSD as well. So lots of different options. And that summarizes all of HiPaint. So if you want to go ahead and get started with this particular design, you'll be able to find the tutorial on screen now, or you'll be able to watch this comparison of Infinite Painter as well. So if you want to check out some other apps that are also available on cross platforms, you can do so with the cards on screen now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.